Hello everybody, this is Dan with Screaming Donkey Woodwork, and today we're making a Xenomorph table. You know, like from the movie Alien. No, I'm totally going to see that. But until it comes out, you can watch me screw this one up and almost have to throw it away. Let's get weird with wood. As per usual lately, I guess we're going to start with some terrible, terrible wood. And this time, when I say it's maple, it's actually maple and not ash. This is the maple you end up with when you leave it on the back lot to rot. Just like your mother-in-law at one point, it had some good figure and it could have looked pretty good. But neglect and an inability to share its feelings has left it broken down and rotten. I'm going to start by cutting this maple down to rough dimensions. I highly recommend that you don't try that with your mother-in-law because it's illegal in most states. And because I have no idea how to do real woodwork or use a hand plane for that matter, I just go ahead and throw it on my CNC machine. No programming or woodworking skills necessary. This thing does everything all on its own. Unfortunately, the robot that came with it looks like a big fat guy, so when you see the robot flipping the wood over and sometimes pushing the buttons, that's just the weird looking AI robot that I got with it. I mean, it's super handsome and sometimes I find myself making out with it, but it is really weird that it's a 40-year-old overweight man. And now with some of this surface grime removed, you can see some of the beautiful figuring that I alluded to earlier. I ended up taking off almost an inch, so I did it in phases. I would take a little bit off, let it rest for a little while, take a little bit more off, and this was just to prevent the wood from curling. Like an onion, these tables are going to have layers. Oh, did I mention we're making two? So, really weird story there. I had someone call and ask for a Xenomorph table, and literally the same day I had another person say, I want a Xenomorph/Predator table, and then call back later and said, no, they only want a Xenomorph table. So I ended up getting 2 orders for Xenomorph tables in the same day. So then I ended up just asking them if they mind if I made them together. The bottom layer of this table is going to be maple, and the top layer is going to be walnut. Very similar to what I just did with the Harry Potter table. Except I'm going to try out some totally different techniques. See those red dogs? I love those things. I saw them on Bidwell Wood and Iron and I just had to have a set. I told them on TikTok, like, those are awesome. Those would be great to have. They sent me a couple of them and I used them nonstop. I think I still have a discount code with them, but I'm not sure. It would be Donkey, I think. If I do, I will post it up in the video description. I'll probably forget though, so if you don't see it when you're watching this video and you really want to know where I got them, remind me and then I'll stick it up in the video description. Do you ever hear the saying, I would rather be lucky than good? This is one of the times where I got lucky and was not good. If I was good, I would have ran a metal detector over this whole slab, but it didn't. I just got lucky and happened to see it as I was doing the flattening. See, good requires you to have practice and be smart, so I would rather be lucky than good. Now, typically I don't put a whole lot of stock in flattening stuff before I make tables out of it because I know that the epoxy is going to warp it a little bit and I'm going to have to flatten it afterward. But this is the case where we're going to sandwich these 2 pieces of wood together, so I had to start off with something that was relatively flat, not just relatively, perfectly flat. And since we're building 2 tables, I have to do everything twice. But luckily for the smaller one, it was small enough to fit through the thicknesser. Yes, I said thicknesser. Thickness. Ugh, I creeped myself out. And everybody says that you can't flatten a piece of wood in a planer, but if it's thick enough, you really can. But this is all just preparation to joint it. So the edge joining there, you could see it's not perfectly lined up. It ran through a saw first. So this is how I get my perfect joints. I don't think I've ever shown this before. I just kind of line it up on the CNC table and then run a 1/2 inch bit right between them. And really, no matter how big the piece of wood is, it's a perfect joint every single time. Now, I do want to reiterate the thing I said with the planer. It is not good practice to try to flatten something with a planer. You should make a flattening sled for the most part. But if the wood is really thick, you can get away with it. Like at least 2 inches, like 1 inch, don't risk it. It's just going to curve the wood around. You're not really going to get it flat, but 2 inches is enough to hold it stiff. Stiff. So when you take it down to 1.5 inches, it'll still hold that rigidity and it will flatten. Part of life and woodworking is the ability to evolve. I mean, if I was still drinking at the levels I was when I met Mrs. Donkey, I don't think we would be married anymore. So in that evolution has been this technique to not actually clean out the bark until I absolutely have to. If half of the bark gets removed through milling and flattening, why would I want to remove the bark first? Just because that's the way that I've always done it? In other words, you need to stop drinking, Patrick. You're 48 years old and waking up on the steps of your home isn't cool anymore. So now that our maple is nice and flattened, I had to build a little mold for it. This material, I always get asked what it is, and it is the ivory from pygmy elephants. That's not exactly right. It's the ivory from endangered pygmy elephants, also known as ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene. If you're looking for it, its street name is UHMWPE. And you'll be satisfied to know that anytime you buy one of these, you'll get one of those dangerous pygmy elephants off the street. All right, here we're mixing up an oxidized bronze looking color, and this is to fill the voids in our maple slab so we can carve out the bottom to have a texture. As always, we are using Wisebond tabletop epoxy to seal up the bottom of our mold. Wisebond. And if you keep watching, you get to hear me reenact a panicked call to Wisebond at midnight, because just like that wild night in college, I screwed up royally. But now with this pour worked perfect. It sealed up the bottom of the mold. I don't think we even got any leaks from it. After it cured, a day or two later, Becca came back and scuffed the top of it because new epoxy does not like to stick to cured epoxy unless it's scuffed up. Speaking of not sticking, did you hear that Michael Bay is going to be directing the new Skibbity toilet movie? I'll hang here while you Google if that's true or not. So now we pour on our Wisebond deep pour epoxy, and it has something to bond to. And I decided to fill this void all the way up to the top so I could use a syringe and fill up all the other little voids in the rest of the table. With all this work, you would think I would actually be accomplishing something with this pour, that this pour will be visible. But no, it's not. This pour is specifically background. So with it just being a background pour, it can be a little bit ugly. And like I tell my trolls, I mean, we can love ugly things too. Just ask your parents. And so I'm going to make a little rant here about the quality of the trolls that I've been getting. It is just ridiculously bad. Like most of them, like immediately jump to the "you mad, bro," or "don't be mad, don't get upset" crap. I deserve better. Like if you can't come with good quality insults, what are you even doing here? These trolls are coming to a gunfight with not even a knife, but a padded helmet on. I mean, I genuinely smile when I see somebody insult my work where I have a little bit of time to think up a great retort. So, take your time. You don't have to respond to my comeback like within the hour. Like take all day if you need it, but come back with something good. But if you come back with a name call insult without even throwing in a pop culture reference, like what am I doing here? You're giving me nothing to work with. But just keep in mind, if you're going out of your way to mess with me while I'm doing my hobby, I may mess with you while you're doing your hobby. So if you don't want me coming down to the bus station and pulling the johns out of your mouth, you may just want to think twice before you try trolling me. So if you're going to come hard. Not like that weird Christmas with your cousin where you try to prove your masculinity, but really come at me. And for those of you that don't know, half the show is in the comments. For every one, "Hey, that's awesome, I love that," there is definitely one, "That looks like crap and you don't know how to do real woodwork." And then I get a lot of, "Could you talk less?" And those are sometimes going to kick off into something fun, but usually not. But every once in a while, a special troll emerges from his masturbatorium and provides such a unique insult that I'm compelled to respond and to win. I wish they just had insult contests. Like I know like rap battles can somewhat be like that, but I don't think I can rap. But I definitely enjoy the art form of insult. All right, I guess I got to talk about the woodwork again. So basically, this is a maze shape that I carved in using a roundover bit, and I used a half-inch roundover. When we finished both, we took them off and had to clean up the edges so we can align them with the top pieces that are going to go on there. Now, I have to say the inspiration for this table design came from Studio V. I warn you, though, if you go and check out his stuff, the guy sounds like a pretentious However, I believe it is my favorite type of pretentious because I believe that the channel is mostly satire. This is actually my favorite type of humor and the type of humor that I employ while doing my live streams. Well, maybe a little in life too. The bad part about this sense of humor is that in my head, everyone is in on the joke. Now imagine that you've joined my live stream and you see the little play button and you decide to select some music, and I stop the live stream just to tell you how inferior your genetics are based on your selection of music. Now in my head, the joke is only a total asshole would act like that. So acting like that would be totally hilarious. However, me personifying a person that I don't believe should exist in society but no actually does not come off as hilarity. It comes off as me accusing this person of having a traumatic brain injury. So go check out Studio V and you tell me, is this person doing the same thing that I do on my lives, or is this really a pretentious you know what? In any case, he has awesome woodwork and it's worth watching even if you hate him. And his graphics and cinematography make me look like I'm still in elementary. All right, so now that we got our weird map brain carved out, I picked where everything was going to go and remapped the holes that I used to cut out on the top onto the bottom pieces. And that way we would have through holes through some of the holes in the walnut. Did that make sense? Yeah, close enough. We're going with it. So this is actually my favorite part of the whole job because some of that walnut was less than paper thin. And it just ended up that way because of the slight amount of warping that happened from the time that we flattened it to the time where we went and did the carve out. And I'm talking, it was paper thin, less than 0.5 millimeter. It was oh so satisfying though. So during this part, I actually used the router so much that I actually had to stop and let the router cool off a little bit, because I went straight from getting that paper thin piece out to doing this round over on the top. Now, I'm up in the air on this if I should have done this round over or not. Hindsight 2020, if I ever do this technique again, I will not round these over. I know it looks really cool, but in the end, it didn't give me the effect that I wanted the way that I wanted it. And I hope I can explain this more later in the video, but basically it ended up releasing some air into the epoxy that we really just couldn't get out all the way. And the natural warping that happens when you pour epoxy into wood, this completely played against it. And the only way that I could finish this table was by flood coating it. So if I didn't round those over, I could have gone away with not flood coating this table. And I think I would have been happier with it, because then I would have ended up with my more traditional wood and epoxy. And I know that's not normal. Most people would just go ahead and flood coat something like this, but I really like that technique I've come up with, and I just think it looks so much better than a flood coat does. No offense to my friends who do a lot of flood coats. I understand why you do it. It always looks gorgeous. So, but I definitely think if I were to do this again, I would not round those over. Here we're just getting rid of the glue squeeze out. So I was just about to sharpen these Narex chisels, so don't beat up on me too much for it. So it was time. So typically you want to use an older or a cheaper chisel to do it, but it was time for these. So I just figured, since I'm going to be sharpening them in a day or two, we're just going to go ahead and use them here. Lately, I've been learning some serious notes on glue squeeze out and having to clean that up after the fact. So in the future, you're going to see me taking more caution or precautions to prevent having to clean up so much squeeze out. I always thought it was kind of stupid because the amount of time you did prepping would be about the same amount of time that you did the clean out, so I never paid much attention to it. However, now that I'm faster in certain parts, it's starting to make sense for me to do the preparation. I'm faster with certain things now, so it just makes sense now. And that's what I'd say with a lot of things. Like, if you can clean it up later in the beginning, that probably makes sense, but you'll understand why people start doing more and more prep work. All right, here I mixed some ink with some alcohol and I put it into that maze pattern there. And the idea is that epoxy always flattens everything out. So I figured if I put a little bit of black there and it all kind of sunk to the bottom of it, that it would highlight it a little bit more, and hopefully that pattern would look less flattened than it normally would look under epoxy. I guess technically it's not highlighting, it's shading the low areas. And since I watch a lot of model painters, I believe this is called a wash. So now that we've sandwiched our two pieces of wood together, we'll go back and put some caulk around all of them just to make sure that none of the epoxy leaks out of it. And we're going to do the same thing with the tabletop epoxy and seal up the edges a little bit before we do our main deep pour. All right, so we made a Xenomorph tongue in this little mold off screen, but here I'm pulling it out of the mold, and it turned out pretty good. We had to clean some of the epoxy off the teeth. Those are werewolf teeth, I believe, that I got off of Amazon. Oh, wait, no, it could have been a vampire silver grill. I think that's what it was, is a silver vampire grill. Like, you could put those over your teeth and walk around and act like you're in Twilight. So the little pods I got those off of Etsy. So I got it from a couple of different ones. There's a face hugger there, too, also from Etsy. And then we have our full Xenomorph, and I believe that was off of Amazon, and basically it's just an action figure model. There's probably a nerdier word for action figure now that I'm not aware of. I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, so when my cousin got He-Man action figures, my dad called them dolls. Oh, he's down there playing with his dolls. So I definitely know that the word action figure has been used in enough derogatory ways that by this point, they've probably changed the name of it. Probably like something like scaled adjustable models or something. So now we're getting to the point where I screwed it up. So as you can see, I had to keep pouring epoxy into this deep pour. Lots and lots of Wisebond deep pour epoxy. And I noticed this. See how it looks kind of like a mosaic? Something was wrong. I immediately stopped and started rummaging through the trash. And I found that I used the deep pour part A with the tabletop part B. So I freaked out and I called Wisebond up at about midnight. And here's my reenactment of what happened. Hey, Wisebond, I have an emergency.
Yeah, Donkey, what's up?
Yeah, I'm mixing up about 9 gallons of clear, and I'm pretty sure I just put one part of tabletop B into the deep pour A.
Oh, that's not good. Can you pull it out?
I tried, and it's already heating up and starting to have an exothermic reaction, and it's gelling.
Okay, we haven't tried it before, but it might be okay. Can you put a fan on it to keep it cool?
And that's what I did. We stuck a fan on it. We just prayed the rest of the night that it would be okay and that it wouldn't flash cure, and lucked out, and it didn't flash cure.
I guess we are done here.
Yeah, we are. Thanks for helping out with the reenactment.
I feel like you used me and just threw me away.
That's because that's pretty much exactly what I did.
This seems mean-spirited.
Yep, moving on. So after our flash cure scare, we were able to go back and top off the rest of the deep pour epoxy the following day. Everything seemed to be okay, but this is where I started to notice the bubbles coming out of the curved edges. I went through and popped them with a torch, but they would just keep coming back out. And the reason for that is something I know already, and that's because the end grains get exposed when you use the roundover like this. Now, your end grain is always a little bit exposed whenever you cut a hole into something, but they're pretty much lined up parallel with the surface. And here, they're rounded off, so they're more exposed. So the bubbles just kept leaking out of those rounded surfaces. Oh, the wand fell. That stuff sucks. So if I were to do this again and wanted the same result, but without the bubbles, I could have done what's called a seal coat. So in that way, what I would have done is taken my Wisebond deep pour epoxy and poured it a little bit and just kind of rubbed it into the sides and let it set there like 2 days before I did my main deep pour, which would allow like the capillary type ends of the open grained wood there to be sealed up so it wouldn't keep leaking air into the epoxy. However, the reason I won't do it beyond that, even if I could solve that problem, is because with solid wood on the bottom and mostly holes in epoxy on top, that wood is going to curve significantly from one side to the other, about 2.5 to 3 millimeters, which means I have to flatten it out. And because I have to flatten it out, the closer I move to the edge, the more of that round over that I would actually be chopping off. So if I just didn't round it over, I could have flattened the top and then made the wood look like wood, the epoxy look like epoxy, and I could have polished all of the epoxy as opposed to flood coating it. So if I ever do it again, that's exactly how I'd do it. I have this part up just because I was counting how many breaks I was taking. This was the last of the 4 sides I was doing, and I just had run out of gas with my forearms. Like literally my hands were cramping up holding the saw and pulling it like this. I definitely need to invest in a Bigfoot saw at this point. So one of those like handheld saws that have the 12-inch blades on them. Here we're cleaning up the bottom, and everyone kept commenting green eggs and ham on the live stream when we were doing this. But to me, it looked like avocados like cut in half. It's hard to justify like an $800 or $900 saw when this is the amount of work that you have to do. Granted, it is on 8 sides, and it did take a little while to do, but it's not that much manual work to be doing from time to time. So I still have a hard time justifying, a saw for the occasional table that's over 2.5 inches thick. So we flattened the small one too, and Becca is going to take some UV epoxy and fill in any pits or holes on the sides, getting it ready to do a seal coat on the back, which is basically just a first part of a flood coat. It's the Wisebond tabletop epoxy mixed up 1 ounce per square foot, and then she just ever so slowly rubs it. And this is driving me crazy. I had to keep skim editing through this because she doesn't do the once over on it first, and then rubs it in with her fingers. So she did it all right. It's just like watching it, like there's a bare spot at one point. You're just like, just rub over the one bare spot. So it's kind of maddening watching the process. So, but she did it all right. So I could say that. But in terms of like making a good video, I'm going to have to like go over it with her the next time. This is a little bit of a chamfer that we're putting on the bottom side of the table. And I swear if I ever do a flood coat, I'm going to do this every single time because it worked out so well. Not only did it look really good, it worked really well for doing a flood coat. And I really just wanted it there because I thought it would look cool, but finding out that it worked well with a flood coat was bonus. Now she's doing the seal coat for the bottom of the large table, and if you can count how many times I skim edited this so we could get the full coverage of it without her just working on one little section. That's 1, 2, 3. She almost gets the edge there, but not quite, so we got to edit again. So 4. And then still a little bit left on the bottom right-hand side. 5. And then one more time, just finish it up with 6. So now we're doing the top flood coat. This is the same thing. The only thing is we're going to do this 3 times. So the first time we do it, we're going to do it with 1 ounce. And then we're going to sand most of that off. And then we're going to do it again with 1 ounce per square foot and sand most of it off again. And then the third coat that we do is going to be a 3 ounce flood coat, and that will be the final one. But visually, the 1 ounce and the 3 ounce all look the same, so I'm only going to show it 1 time on here because all it does when you put it on is all clouded up and it goes crystal clear. It's a great shot, but showing it 3 times would just be kind of redundant. And just like the other flood coats, Becca does not cover the whole thing first and then go back and rub it all in. So I had to do a bunch of skim edits just so you would get the satisfaction of seeing at least all the holes in the table exposed. She tends to work in an area before it's done. This drives me crazy. I don't know why it's bugging me so much. But for cinematically, it's just wrong. You got to get that nice big shot of the epoxy going out smooth over all of it. And she does get it right, though. She does the technique right. She does rub it all in and make sure that she's got the right size layer. I want to be playing some Barry White here, like, ooh, baby. But, like copyright infringement, you can't do anything cool. I have envy of my kids in that sense because I know they're going to figure out how you can use like a couple of lines and pay a couple of bucks for music on YouTube sooner or later. But we don't have it. We should be able to use like 2 lines of music. You pay like $30 or something to do it. Like so many of us would use that. Artists would make more. Everybody would be happy. So after we do those flood coats and seal coats, she goes back with some hard wax oil and finishes the bottom up like that. And that way it's done. And if we did accidentally expose some wood from the sanding process, then that hard wax will seal that back in. So after it's all poured, the bottom's all done. The only thing left to do is to put a nano coat protectorant on it. And we nano coat this, flipped it over to the other side and started putting these little tea lights in there. And thought this was a really cool idea. I mean, it was my idea, so I guess I have to think it was pretty cool. Very often I'm pulling inspiration from others, but this one I got to have all on my own. So I never put LEDs in a table. I will put them under a table. This is the closest thing to in a table I've ever done because the fun fact that people don't know is LEDs burn out. So if you embed LEDs into the epoxy, there's a good chance that you're going to have one burn out and it's going to look weird forever. So with this idea, if one of those lights goes bad, you would just replace it, and then you wouldn't have a weird-looking light in there. If you're trying to light up purple and it's just showing green because there's no red, you don't have that problem here with this setup. And the last, and I mean very last thing we do is put these flowy line legs on. I love them because they do great with wood stability. They help hold everything in place. And the slots give the wood a place to expand and contract. I put them very close to the end because it's only a 48-inch wide table and they're going to be using it as a desk, so I wanted them to have as much leg room as humanly possible. I know this process of putting the legs on may seem a little bit intimidating at first, and it kind of is, but it gets easier after you do a couple. I don't really use double-sided tape to hold anything in position when I'm marking out where the holes go, but I would recommend that you do that. And if you're doing the smaller legs, I absolutely recommend that you do that because things just move around when you start tapping them with a hammer. And the position on the larger ones doesn't matter as much. There can be a couple millimeters of play. But on the smaller ones, there's no margin for error. I mean, the slots in there are a little over a 1/4 inch, and if you're off center just a little bit, you're not going to be able to get your screws in. So here it is all lit up, and you could see where we hung the little light off the bottom of it. I thought that was really cool. That comes out. They could actually fill it with liquid too because it's all watertight. Even the lights are watertight. So here's our finished product. There's the flowy line legs. There's our nice flood coat. There's a couple of bubbles in there that we weren't able to carve out 100%, but you have to look for them. I can see them. I see some right there. And I hate that, but I'm pretty sure that the customer is going to love it. It was one of my favorite tables to build so far. I just really love this design, and I can't wait to do it again on something else. I hope you liked it. Until next time, get weird with wood. If you like what you saw here and you want to see more, like maybe ones where I still had no idea what I was doing, check out these other videos. I mean, what else are you going to do? Watch the Olympics and drag. High five someone much shorter than you and make them jump. Protest right to repair. Search the no-fly list for chasing other flies with a net in the field. Correct, whenever.